you feel trapped, not by walls, not by chains, not by any physical barrier you could point to and say, there, that's what's holding me back. You feel trapped by your circumstances, by your history, by who you are and where you came from, by decisions you made years ago that you can't undo, by opportunities you missed, by doors that closed, by time that passed. And when people tell you that you can change, that you can grow, that you have potential you haven't accessed, something in you recoils. Because they don't understand. They don't know your situation. They don't know what you've been through. They don't know the weight of everything that brought you to this moment. They're speaking from the outside, and you're living on the inside. Here's what I need you to understand. You're right about one thing. They don't understand your situation. But you're wrong about something much more important. Neither do you. You think you're trapped by reality. You're not. You're trapped by a story about reality. A map you've been carrying for so long, you've forgotten it's not the same thing as the territory. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a life lived in a cell and a life lived in the world. There's a concept that most people never encounter. It comes from a philosopher named Alfred Korzybski. He spent his life studying how human beings represent reality to themselves, how we take the infinite complexity of what is and compress it into symbols, words, beliefs. And he discovered something that should terrify you. The map is not the territory. The representation is not the thing itself. Your beliefs about your life are not your life. And right now, you're living inside a map that someone else drew. In a prison built from inherited beliefs. In a story written by people who never knew you and never cared what you could become. If you're watching this, you've felt the walls. You've tested them. You've pushed against them and found them solid. But they're not walls. They're lines on a map. And lines on a map can be redrawn. Let me tell you how the map got drawn. You were born into a world that was already interpreting itself. Your parents had beliefs about what was possible. Your culture had narratives about who gets to succeed. Your early experiences created patterns, and slowly, invisibly, you absorbed it all. When you were 3 years old, and you reached for something and were told no, you didn't just learn about that object. You learned about reaching, about wanting, about whether the world would meet your desires or reject them. When you were 7 and you failed at something in front of others, you didn't just learn about that failure. You learned about visibility, about risk, about whether it was safe to try when others were watching. When you were 15 and someone you trusted betrayed you, you didn't just learn about that person. You learned about trust itself, about people, about whether the world was fundamentally safe or fundamentally hostile. Every experience became a data point. Every data point became a pattern. Every pattern became a belief. Every belief became invisible. This is the trap. Beliefs don't feel like beliefs. They feel like reality. When you think, I'm not the kind of person who does that, it doesn't feel like an opinion. It feels like a fact, like gravity, like something true about the structure of the universe. When you think, people like me don't end up there, it doesn't feel like a story. It feels like observation, like pattern recognition, like wisdom earned through experience. When you think, I can't because of my past, my family, my circumstances, it doesn't feel like interpretation. It feels like honest assessment, like facing the truth instead of indulging in fantasy. But here's what the Stoics understood 2,000 years ago. Every single one of those thoughts is a choice. Not a conscious choice, not a deliberate choice, but a choice nonetheless. You are not responding to what happened. You are responding to your interpretation of what happened, your judgment about what it means, your belief about what it says about you, about the world, about what's possible. And the cruel joke is this: most of your beliefs were installed before you were old enough to question them, before you had the cognitive tools to examine them, before you had any say in the matter at all. You've been walking around with a map drawn by a child, by traumatized parents, by a culture that needed you to stay small, by teachers who projected their own limitations onto you, by experiences you misinterpreted because you didn't have the context to interpret them accurately. And you've been treating that map like scripture. There was a man born into slavery in ancient Rome. His name was Epictetus. He had every reason to believe his life was determined by forces outside his control. He was property. He had no rights, no freedom, no agency. He was beaten so badly by his master that he walked with a limp for the rest of his life, and yet he became one of the freest men who ever lived. Not because his circumstances changed. He did eventually gain his freedom, but that's not what I'm talking about. He became free while he was still a slave. Free in a way that most people never experience, even when they have every external freedom the world can offer. How? He understood something that most people never grasp. Something so simple, it sounds stupid when you first hear it. Something so profound, it can rebuild your entire life if you actually apply it. He said, "We are not disturbed by things, but by our opinions about things." Read that again. You are not disturbed by things. You are disturbed by your opinions about things, not by what happens, by what you think it means, not by your circumstances, by your interpretation of your circumstances, not by reality, by your map of reality. This is not positive thinking. This is not pretending that bad things are actually good. This is not denial or delusion or toxic optimism. This is the recognition that between every event and your response to it, there is a gap. And in that gap lives your power. Something happens. That's the territory, the objective fact, the thing itself. Then you have a thought about what happened. That's the map, the interpretation, the meaning you assign. Then you have an emotional response, not to what happened, but to what you think it means. Then you take action based on that emotional response. Most people think this is one movement. Event leads directly to emotion, leads directly to action. Automatic, inevitable, outside their control. But it's not. There are 4 distinct steps. And the second step, the interpretation, is entirely within your control, even when the event itself is not. Epictetus said that events themselves are neither good nor bad. They are indifferent, neutral. What makes them good or bad is the use we make of them, the meaning we assign, the belief we bring. The same event can destroy one person and forge another. Not because the event was different, because the map was different. Let me show you how this works in your actual life. You apply for a job. You don't get it. That's the territory, the fact, the thing that happened. Now watch what happens next. One person thinks, I wasn't qualified. I need more skills. I'll work on that. And try again. Another person thinks, they didn't see my value. That company didn't deserve me anyway. I'll find somewhere better. Another person thinks, I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. Why do I even try? Same event. 3 completely different maps. 3 completely different emotional experiences. 3 completely different futures. The person who thinks they need more skills feels motivated. they go learn. They improve. They become genuinely more qualified. The rejection becomes the catalyst for growth. The person who thinks the company didn't deserve them feels indignant. They stay the same. They look for external validation. The rejection confirms their existing map that the world is the problem. The person who thinks they're fundamentally inadequate feels crushed. They withdraw. They stop trying. The rejection becomes evidence for a map they've been carrying since childhood. None of these interpretations are the truth. They're just maps, stories, beliefs, but they create completely different lives. This is what most people never understand. You think you're trapped by what happened. You're trapped by what you decided it meant. And the devastating part? You don't even remember making that decision. It happened automatically, in the space of a breath. Your history, your conditioning, your previous beliefs all conspired to generate an interpretation. And you accepted it as reality without ever examining it. This is the invisible prison, not what happens to you. What you tell yourself about what happens to you. The Stoics had a practice for this. They called it examining impressions. Every time something happened, every time they had a reaction, they would pause and ask, what am I adding to this? What part of my response is about the thing itself? And what part is about my belief about the thing? Most of what you think is objective observation is actually interpretation. When you say, I can't do that because I don't have the connections, that's not observation. That's belief. A belief that connections are required. A belief that you can't build them. A belief that this particular path is the only path. When you say, I'm too old to start over, that's not fact. That's belief. A belief about what age means. A belief about what starting over requires. A belief about what's possible in the time you have left. When you say, people like me don't succeed at that, that's not pattern recognition. That's identity. An inherited map about who you are and what that means about what you can do. Every limitation you experience that isn't a physical law of the universe is a belief. And beliefs can be examined, questioned, changed. But first, you have to see them. Here's the practice that changes everything. For the next week, every time you feel stuck, every time you feel limited, every time you think you can't do something, write down the exact thought, not a summary, the exact words that went through your mind. Then ask yourself 3 questions. These are Stoic questions. Questions that Epictetus would have asked. Questions designed to separate the map from the territory. Question 1. What actually happened? Strip away all interpretation, all meaning, all judgment, just the bare facts, the things a camera would have recorded. Not, they rejected me. That's interpretation. The fact is, they sent an email that said they chose another candidate. Not, I failed. That's judgment. The fact is, I attempted something and the outcome wasn't what I wanted. Not, I'm trapped by my circumstances. That's belief. The fact is, I currently have these specific constraints. Question 2. What am I telling myself this means? This is where you find the map, the interpretation, the belief that's generating your emotional response. They rejected me might become, I'm not good enough. I failed might become, I always fail. I'm trapped might become, nothing will ever change. These are not facts. These are stories, beliefs, interpretations. Write them down, look at them, recognize them for what they are. Question 3. Is there another way to interpret this? Not a better way, not a more positive way, just another way. Because if there's another way, then your current interpretation is a choice, not a fact. They chose another candidate could mean you're not good enough. It could also mean they needed different skills. It could mean they had an internal candidate. It could mean your interview was on the wrong day. It could mean the hiring manager had a bad morning. It could mean 1,000 things. You picked one interpretation, usually without realizing you were picking. And that interpretation created your entire emotional experience. The Stoics weren't saying that you should always pick the most optimistic interpretation. They were saying that you should recognize that you're interpreting at all, that you're using a map, and that the map is not the territory. Once you see this, really see it, everything changes, because now you have power. Not power over events, power over meaning, power over the map. Epictetus taught his students to divide everything into two categories: things within your control, things outside your control. And he was ruthless about this division. More ruthless than almost anyone is willing to be. Outside your control. What other people think. What other people do. Whether you succeed or fail. Whether you get the outcome you want. Your past. Your genetics. Your circumstances. What happens to you. Inside your control. Your judgments. Your interpretations. Your effort. Your character. Your choices. How you respond. The meaning you make. The map you use. That's it. That's the division. And here's the principle that most people find unbearable. Everything outside your control is indifferent, neutral, not good or bad in itself. What makes it good or bad is what you make of it. You got rejected. That's indifferent. What's not indifferent is how you interpret it, whether you use it as evidence that you're inadequate, or evidence that you need more preparation, or evidence of nothing at all. Just a thing that happened. Your parents were critical. That's indifferent. The past is outside your control. What's not indifferent is whether you continue to carry their voice in your head as the voice of truth. Whether you continue to let their map determine your territory. You don't have the connections other people have. That's indifferent. What's not indifferent is whether you decide that means you can't succeed, or whether you decide that means you'll have to build differently. This sounds harsh. It sounds like I'm minimizing pain. I'm not. I'm showing you where your power actually lives. You cannot change what happened. You cannot control outcomes. You cannot force the world to give you what you want. But you can control the map. You can examine your beliefs. You can question your interpretations. You can choose different meanings. You can redraw the lines. Here's the practice. Take one belief that's limiting you, one map that's keeping you trapped, something you've been treating as a fact, but is actually an interpretation. Write it down. Then write the evidence for it, the actual evidence, not feelings, not impressions, concrete facts. Most of the time, you'll find the evidence is thin, circumstantial, based on limited data, filtered through a particular lens. Then ask, what would someone with a different map see in this same situation? Someone confident would see the same rejection and think it's a filtering mechanism. Someone paranoid would see conspiracy. Someone growth-oriented would see feedback. Same territory, different maps. The map you're using is not the truth. It's a tool. And if the tool isn't working, if it's creating a life you don't want, you can choose a different tool. This is not self-deception. This is not pretending things are different than they are. This is recognizing that your beliefs are not observations. They're choices, usually unconscious choices, inherited choices, choices made by earlier versions of you who didn't know better. but now you do. So now you can choose differently. Here's what's going to happen when you start doing this. Something in you is going to resist. Hard. Because your ego has been living inside this map for years, decades, maybe your entire life. And the ego doesn't want to admit that the walls were never real, that you've been trapped by your own interpretation this entire time, that you had more power than you ever realized. That feels like a betrayal, like all those years were wasted, like you should have known better. And so the ego will fight. It will insist that your circumstances really are impossible, that your history really does determine your future, that your limitations really are facts about the universe and not beliefs you can change. It will bring evidence. It will show you all the times you tried and failed, all the ways the world has said no, all the reasons your particular situation is different. And here's the trap. The ego will be partly right. Some things really are outside your control. Some circumstances really are constraining. Some histories really do create disadvantages. The territory is real. The constraints are real. But your interpretation of what those constraints mean is not real. That's still the map. Having fewer resources means you have to be more strategic. That's a fact. It does not mean you cannot succeed. That's a belief. Coming from a difficult background means you have different challenges. That's a fact. It does not mean you are permanently damaged. That's a belief. Starting later than others means you have less time. That's a fact. It does not mean it's too late. That's a belief. The Stoics lived under emperors who could kill them on a whim. They lived through plagues and wars and exile. They experienced real constraints, real dangers, real limitations. And yet they remained free because they understood the difference between the territory and the map, between what was happening and what it meant, between the facts of their situation and their interpretation of those facts. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz, a literal death camp, and he wrote that the one thing they couldn't take from him was his ability to choose his response, his interpretation, his meaning. If that's true in Auschwitz, it's true in your life. Whatever your circumstances, you still have the one power that matters, the power to choose your map. So here's the question you need to answer. How much longer are you going to live inside a map drawn by other people? How much longer are you going to treat inherited beliefs as inevitable facts? How much longer are you going to let interpretations made by a child, a wounded teenager, a desperate younger version of you determine what you think is possible now? The Stoics had a phrase for this moment. They called it learning to die, not literal death. The death of who you thought you were. The death of the story you've been telling about why things are the way they are. The death of the comfortable prison that kept you safe by keeping you small. That version of you, the one who's convinced they know exactly how limited they are, has to die. Because that version is living in a map. And the map is not the territory. The territory is bigger than you think, more open, more possible. But you cannot see it while you're clutching the old map. The one that says you can't. The one that says people like you don't. The one that says your past determines your future. The one that says your circumstances are your destiny. That map has to burn. And here's the hard part. You're the only one who can light the match. No one can do this for you. No one can force you to examine your beliefs. No one can make you question your interpretations. No one can show you that the walls were always just lines on paper. You have to choose to look, to question, to examine, to to redraw. Epictetus said that when someone tries to upset you, remember that it's not the person who's upsetting you. It's your judgment about the person, your belief about what they should or shouldn't do, your interpretation of what their actions mean about you. The same is true for your entire life. You are not trapped by reality. You are trapped by your beliefs about reality. And beliefs can change. Not easily, not overnight, not without work, but they can change. The question is whether you're willing to do that work, whether you're brave enough to question the map you've been carrying, whether you're ready to discover that the territory was always bigger than you thought. Most people aren't. Most people will live their entire lives inside the map, treating their limitations as facts, their beliefs as reality, their interpretations as truth. They'll feel trapped. They'll blame circumstances. They'll point to all the reasons they can't. And they'll never realize that they were holding the key the entire time. The key is simple. The map is not the territory. Your beliefs about your life are not your life. And the moment you truly understand that, everything becomes possible. The prison was always made of paper. The question is whether you're brave enough to walk through it.